Yes, and for the numbers people out there, so the heart has a 60 times bigger energetic field than electric field, than the head. And it also has a 5,000 times stronger magnetic field than the head. So the heart is so much stronger than our head, and it has so much more information. It's just that we haven't learned how to access it or how to listen to it. So I spent quite some time just retraining that skill, relearning that skill.
Welcome at the Aligned and Ambitious podcast, where we dive deep into conversations with role models on their own aligned, ambitious journey. And today I have Pamela Wagner with me here. I'm really excited, Pamela, that you're here today because, we met through the Forbes Under 30 community chat, so it's quite random how we got to know each other, but I'm really happy that we did because I've been seeing some of your journey and some of your posts that really resonate with Aligned Ambitious. And I'm just excited to dive the next 40 minutes or so deeper into the journey that you've been on. But before we get started, I want to make sure that the listeners also get a bit of an impression of what you've been doing. Because over the last 10 plus years, you've been building and leading in an aligned and ambitious way on companies that help companies to help other companies build that, but also through a more traditional company, I would say. So you've been building and leading Ajala Digital, where you help with advertisements and companies to become more AI native. So you can talk perhaps a bit more about that in detail shortly. But next to that, you also have Hustle Less and Live More. And already that name to me resonates a lot. So I'm also just really excited to learn more about that, where you train and coach Fortune 500 companies and their leaders to help build a life that is less focused on stress and burnout and more on creativity and people being aligned with themselves, which of course is a super important topic and exactly why we also spotlight you and other role models here in the podcast. Your work has been featured not only in the Forbes Under 30 list, but next to that also by the Washington Times, ABC News, and many more news outlets. And yeah, I think it's just great that we speak today because you're quite an inspirational person for what I've been seeing from the sideline so far. So I would say, Pamela, welcome, and let's dive in.
Thank you so much for having me here, Floor. It's a pleasure, and I'm super excited for this conversation.
Yeah, maybe just to start off, Pamela, can you talk a bit about what is it that you do at Ajala Digital and then at work Hustle Less and Live More, and how do the two also come together? Because they seem quite isolated, of course, but for you, probably it isn't.
Yeah, sure. So I was for almost a full year at Google after graduating from my first master's degree. Was my first full-time job out of university. And once I found myself out of Google, I was wondering what to do in general. And I'd gathered all these knowledge working at Google, helping advertisers like companies learn more about Google Ads, troubleshoot anything about Google Analytics, Google Maps, any Google products pretty much that you have in advertising. And I started freelancing, using freelancer platforms, my own network. And 4 months after I'd left the company, I replaced my Google salary in a month with my entrepreneurial activities, where I was helping companies scale with the help of ads. And that was also quite an achievement to me personally, because I don't come from an entrepreneurship family. And so I was like, hey, if I can get it this far, I can probably also figure out how to make it last. And that's been 10 years now. The company has evolved from, in this case, Ajala Digital has evolved from just doing Facebook ads, Google ads, TikTok ads, and so on for companies, to delivering more of a strategic advice. And then in the last couple of years, also helping companies transition more to AI in the sense of making the workflows more efficiently, because most small and medium businesses do not have the capacity or the cash flow to hire a full content team, to hire a full agency, and so on. And AI really has enabled us to get a lot of these things done more efficiently, still have a human in the loop. So we always want to make sure it sounds like you, it is your brand voice, not just another AI slop. But at the same time, get work done in 15 minutes a week that used to take 20, 40 hours a week sometimes. And I think that's a really exciting change, because what we're seeing with that from our clients is that they get to spend more time with their family. They get to do more of the treatments that they love if they're in the healthcare space. They get to finally create an art gallery that they always wanted. They get to spend more time with their kids. They get to finally hire, I don't know, like a nutrition coach, or do more of what they really want in life. And with that, work less and work less hard while scaling their success. And that already takes me a little bit to the second brand, Hustle Less and Live More, which came out of a very long personal journey with where I'd like overcome allergies that I had. So I used to have allergies. I did like a biomagnetism session. I got rid of it. And then I had experienced several incidences that would be classified as trauma, and then I overcame those with several different other tools. And all the while experiencing this, I always drew from the inside of me. So I never tried to rely on anything external to fix something. And what I mean by that is that a lot of people rely on external measures to make them feel happy. They drink alcohol, they smoke, they have an addiction to social media, and so on. And I always truly believe that if there's anything,
basically.
Yeah. And so I always believe that we have everything we need within ourselves in order to be happy and healthy. And I've noticed that while I was running my advertising company, I never really worked more than 30 hours a week. Because I noticed the more I worked beyond that, the less productive I actually was. It was more like busy work. It was not work that really was important. I thought it was important. And so I was like, this is interesting. And then through like the Forbes 30 and the 30 network that we share, through like other networks I'm part of, I've seen that a lot of people that are oftentimes in the public eye, that are seen as very successful, that probably have everything in the materialistic sense that we want, oftentimes do not have their own health. They don't have healthy relationships. They have all kinds of mental problems. They can't form relationships. They might not talk to their kids anymore. And so that struck me, because I was like, hey, I'm here running this company. I mean, I'm not making, so much money. Absolutely not. I'm far away from that, but I'm making a comfortable amount of money while not overworking myself, while being happy, while feeling fulfilled, while creating value for our clients. So there is obviously another way. And then I did a second master's degree in psychology, and then started collaborating with Salesforce and helping some of their top women executives to reduce stress through very specific workshops. And yeah, that's kind of like how these two live and coexist currently. I like both. I like them coexisting. And I love that I'm able to do both on a daily basis. So
Yeah, thanks for that, Pamela. And already you touched upon so many points, like AI to help people feel more happy and aligned instead of fearing AI, which is also a big topic in today's society. And then you had your own experience and what you've seen. So that's why I'm really excited for the next minutes that we have left to dive deeper into that, because you're the perfect role model on aligned, ambitious. Maybe let's start just with like success, what you just talked about, of what people find successful. You said like you left Google, and then within a month you already made the salary that you had there. So that was like a first success point for you. What was back then when you started 10 years ago, your entrepreneurial journey, like what success meant for you? What were you chasing or hoping to get out of that journey?
So it took me about 4 months. It wasn't quite that fast. It was like a month.
Okay, well, still a few months.
But I think it's still okay. I honestly, I don't know. I of course at certain points had this belief I have to make $1 million a year, and that's a goal and whatever. But I figured very quickly that money doesn't make me happy. And
How did you figure that out?
I just couldn't feel anything with that amount. It was meaningless to me. So I'm very much in tune with my body. And it's something I had to learn because I'm very much a head-based person, typically. And I also noticed quickly that I'm pretty good at setting certain goals, achieving them, like, for example, getting on the Forbes 30 and the 30 list. But then I noticed whenever I achieved something, the actual happiness lasted only about a couple minutes. And that's it. And so through my own successes, like very early on, I played basketball in school and we won a lot of championships. And so that was one of my first encounters between the age of 9 and 13, where I realized, I was like, oh, it would be cool to win this. We won this. I was like, oh, after 5 minutes, you're back to square one almost. So I was like, okay, so obviously if that's not, if the goal doesn't make me happy, and psychology backs this up and all that, then it must be about the journey. And I thought a lot about all these things before being aware of the psychological principles behind that, like the hedonic treadmill and all of those terms. And so I just started realizing that, hey, I can have goals. I think it's very good to have dreams. It's very good to aim for something, but on the way there, you shouldn't lose yourself. And a lot of people lose themselves on the way there. They lose their health. Yeah. They lose their relationships. They lose their happiness. And they think that's part of the sacrifice because it's the story we're being told, without realizing that there's a compound effect of all those sacrifices that we make, which is breaking relationships, which is your health. Like when you're young, you can do certain things you can't do after a certain age. But if you don't take care of your body as a young person, it will come back to you later. In 100% of the cases, I've not seen any exception yet. And so we think we can pay the price for certain things and it's necessary. But in order to be truly happy, I've seen that that's not necessarily. If you truly want to be happy, there is no sacrifice needed.
Yeah, so you started your entrepreneurial journey. You were ambitious in that journey, but you also figured out quick enough that, well, the traditional sides of effect weren't going to give you the rewards that you were looking for. So you found more joy in the journey. Is that how I could sum it up, Pamela? That was rather the success that you were starting to look for?
Yeah, and I think that also comes from me having done my bachelor's degree at the very university and now teach courses sometimes at, and the goal of almost every student at that university during the bachelor's degree is to work at one of the big consulting companies. But until today, and no offense to these companies, I haven't met a single person that told me I'm truly happy at one of these consulting companies. So I kept observing people having that dream, but then also seeing that actually nobody's happy when they get there. So that was something else that kind of like forced me to think a lot about what success actually means.
So it's even familiar to me because I also studied strategic management, where a lot of like the typical path was then to go into traditional consulting. And along that way of like my master's lasted a year, I saw like people chasing that goal. But then I was like, but why actually? Why are we chasing that? And it's oftentimes for the status or ego or because, of course, also the career opportunities that it gives. But it's a lot of the external validation that you talked about before as well that people are looking for. So yeah, it's good to realize that earlier on in your career, ideally. But you talked also about going from head to feeling, so making like logical decisions and then tuning more into your body. Could you talk us a bit about how you came to that conclusion and what did you do to not only realize it, but also to act upon it? I would find that really curious because this is a point where so many people in today's society struggle with because we're all so trained to be so rational and to make logical decisions.
Yeah. So because of the way that I grew up, where I'm consciously not going into too many details because I believe that those details are in the past and they don't matter to the meaning of the story anymore. But it was a childhood that was a bit challenging at times. And in order to really survive and thrive, I spent a lot of time in my head justifying the way things were. I spent a lot of time in my head dreaming about how the future would be. I spent a lot of time in my head trying to make things be okay. And at the same time, I was really good at school. I skipped 2 grades in school. And so I was younger than everybody once I graduated high school by like 2 to 3 years. And all that contributed to me just really living in my head heavily. And it had formed the story that my head helped me survive. And once I'm in my head, or anytime I'm in my head, that means I'm safe because I can progress, I can move forward. There's something I can do. It has meaning. And then you start noticing slowly that, wait, somehow there's something else out there. And the one thing that I think sparked that, or it was one of the many sparks, is I always wanted to study abroad, but it was not within the finances. And so I said, you know what, I'm gonna work abroad. And I found the student organization that I was with, and they'd let me go to Nigeria at the age of 18. Now, I'd never been to like Africa except for Egypt and Tunisia, and that as a tourist, let alone going as an 18-year-old to a country where you stand out because of the way you look like. I hadn't yet had any idea about the perception that people would have with that skin color as well. But I said, you know what? I only know negative things about this country. I want to see how it really is. And so I set the intention that once I got into the plane, by leaving Austria, which is where I grew up, I also left behind any of those perceptions. And so I set that intention. And once I arrived in that country, it wasn't that I had the easiest time, but I had a really good time. It was a time from which I still have an immense network today. And because I set this intention and I allowed myself to follow it, and I had a good time, I learned that, hey, you know what? There's actually power in something bigger than just my head. And that was one of the first ways where I saw, oh, okay, there's more to it.
But
if we want to get
sorry to interrupt also, Pamela,
Yeah.
that was also a bit more like not even from head to feeling, but also from just your single source of power as a human to maybe something bigger out there, is it not?
Yeah. And
Whether you call it universal power or energy or whatever people want to call
yes,
it, that's what you mean by that, right?
it was one of the first encounters where I saw, oh, you know what? There's power behind the energy that I have and that I put out. And then I started immersing myself into various ways of personal development work, meditation, and so on. And I started seeing that, like, hey, things I imagined today suddenly became true within like 2 weeks or something. It's like, oh, whoa, okay, so this is how this works. So
Powerful manifester.
yeah, not all the time. I still have work to do as well. But I started realizing that one of the many reasons that I stayed safe on my many travels, and I've been to over 100 countries, is because I'm very good with my intuition. I'm very good at sensing my environment and then acting accordingly. So, for example, if people would want to go to a party and I would start feeling tired at 11, I go home. I don't wait. I don't force myself to stay out. And then everybody else would stay on longer, and then something might have happened. But I left, and that saved me from experiencing whatever that happened. And so I kept seeing those situations where I just listened to my heart. There was nothing to explain. I just listened to my heart, and it always worked out great. So that brought me a lot of like positive reinforcement.
And how did you start to trust that feeling? Because I think people can usually relate to it. But it's one thing that you have to trust. And then the second thing is to nurture this more and more so that your intuition becomes stronger. What did you do, or what helped for you to train this? Is it time? Is it certain tools? A combination?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I grew up with seeing a lot of behaviors that I did not want to see myself replicate, I started diving deep into behavior change early on. And what I noticed is what really worked well for me in terms of my own behavior change is noticing the small things that happened because I did something, because I changed something. And celebrating those small wins, those 1% over and over again. And that's one of the things I see these days that people don't do often enough. Something good happens because of a change they made, and they just say like, that was coincidence, or of course, like instead of saying, hey, you know what? No, I'm actually gonna own that. This is because of me, and I want more of that. And so I think I was really good at doing that.
So it's being conscious about it, being mindful, but also celebrating wins, which is something that people also don't do that much anymore. People focus a lot on negative instead of on the positive things. So you would say that that's a bit of their recipe that you've used to lean more into feeling and intuition.
Yeah, constant positive reinforcement and really being aware of when anything good happened. And I just noticed that also good things happen automatically when I'm in my heart. So because I'm in my heart, good things happen. So that's the kind of thought I try to practice.
I love that. I use that as well for my business. How do you apply this in your companies?
I would probably not be a fit to teach a business or entrepreneurship class because I don't really plan. I don't really set out to say, you know what, I'm going to make X amount of money. That's never really worked for me. I set out to feel a certain way. So I look at, oh, how do I want to grow? How do I want to feel? How do I want to experience XYZ? So, for example, this year, one of my themes was growing more through partnerships. And then suddenly those partnerships came along, and because I followed certain intuitions with certain things. So, and anytime I try to force something, like I'm like, okay, we have like these 100 podcasts and I must reach out to them. Um, it just doesn't work that way. I give you an example, very concrete example. I had, I think, what was that? Easily 5-6 years ago. I had my virtual assistant team create a list of the top 100 universities in the world, and then we would reach out to every single one of them because I wanted to teach more. And we did not get a single positive response. I think we might have gotten 1 or 2 responses, but none of them ended up in a teaching engagement. And but then later I was like, hey, you know what? Actually, I want to teach a bit more. And then the university I was teaching at, they asked me if I wanted to teach another course. And then a university where I did a master's degree was like, oh, why don't you teach this course? And then it just came to me. So I've learned over the years by looking at all those signs out there, which I know can sound very woo-ish, but if I just look at the signs, if I just have the right intention, if I make sure I'm in the right energy, then good things come to me without any effort whatsoever.
I love that. And I think especially, Pamela, for listeners who might not be into this energy or way of business yet, to summarize what you just said, it is like you make sure that your personal development, your energy is right. Therefore, you get desires or inspiration of what might be up next for you. And then instead of forcing it to make it happen, you carefully look at the signs around you, you carefully look at the people that you meet, that you maybe hope to meet. And then in the end, you meet them in a coincidence way or in some way or the other because of partnerships that naturally come to you. So that in the end, the desires that you had will happen, but in a state of flow. That's
Yeah,
what you, I think, just said in a more recipe format so people can kind of see the logic more behind it, even though there's no real logic behind this.
Yes, and for the numbers people out there, so the heart has a 60 times bigger energetic field than electric field, than the head. And it also has a 5,000 times stronger magnetic field than the head. So the heart is so much stronger than our head, and it has so much more information. It's just that we haven't learned how to access it or how to listen to it. So I spent quite some time just retraining that skill, relearning that skill.
Yeah, and you do that both for yourself and for the leaders that you train. So maybe I think usually I talk in the podcast a lot about like the turning point and then the journey from like being just ambitious to aligned ambitious. I think in your case, Pamela, it's been that you've always been from the start of your entrepreneurial journey very aligned ambitious. So let's maybe talk about how you help leaders and how you train and coach them on that journey. Like what's usually the turning point from them for them? And then how do you help them get onto the aligned and ambitious journey?
A lot of leaders think they have to sacrifice and hustle hard to get to success. Yeah. And their turning point is usually a certain mental tiredness with a certain physical tiredness. And what I mean by that is mentally, they might already see that they're starting to get exhausted, maybe signs of burnout. And physically, they typically experience jaw pain, neck pain, back pain, allergies, chronic pain for years, sometimes for decades. I sometimes also encounter more extreme cases of people say, hey, I have to throw up at least once a week to feel good. Now, then they get to a point where they're like, I just can't do this anymore. I don't want to keep taking pills anymore. I don't want to keep hiding anymore. I feel like I deserve so much more. They might be at the point of breaking where they're like, I have always been the one that's there for my family, husband, kids, maybe, parents. I'm the one at work that everybody relies on. But if you'd ask them who they have to lean on, there's like nobody. And some even break out in tears when you just ask that question. And so I believe that all that shouldn't be necessary in order to be happy and to truly have the career that you want. Nobody should have to trade their health, their sleep, or the people that they love to succeed in a company. And so that's why I've started teaching all these like high performers how to really perform at their best without burning out and without sacrificing themselves.
And what are some of their tools that then come along? Because like I think it's one point for people to start realize that, okay, I got to a point where this is not good for me anymore. It's not healthy. I feel so stressed or burned out, etc. But then from the realization to actually living more aligned and ambitious is quite difficult because it's about completely rewiring everything that you've been doing so far, whether you're in your 30s or even your 50s, it's getting only harder and harder. How does that go, Pamela? What can people do to make that happen?
In a lot of cases, we have to look at the family history, and that can sometimes involve a tool called family constellation, which I'm a big part of. It's not something I practice. I haven't learned to practice it. I've just taken part in it. But many times we're still stuck in family structures that came from our grandparents, from our great-grandparents, from our own parents, maybe from like, siblings that were stillborn, siblings that didn't even come alive, that were aborted. And there are so many structures where, like, for example, the super ambitious 40-year-old woman that works at a consulting company in a very well-paying job might have just always been used to being rather the parent for her own parents and actually being a child for them. And that comes with an immense burden. But her nervous system thinks that, oh, this is safe. This is how the world is supposed to be. And so for her, being successful means like, oh, I have to take care of everybody else, maybe even to get love. So in order to be successful, to be liked at work, I also have to take care of everybody else, even if they're not my parents, but the nervous system doesn't think that far. And so we keep repeating these patterns.
Is programmed.
The conditioning
is just programmed. Yeah.
Yeah. And so family constellation is one of these tools to help to solve that. Then there's breath work. There is lots of different introspections. So for example, an exercise I gave to one of my clients this year was I told him to write a letter to time because he felt like he never had enough time. And since he did that, I met him, I think 2 weeks ago again. Yeah, I met him 2 weeks ago. And he said, I just don't feel like time is an issue anymore. Like it's just always there. Like whatever I want to do, there's always enough time. So his relationship with time completely transformed. Their visualization, practicing the feeling of something is extremely important. How do you actually want to feel? And then language. I'm a big fan of really watching one's language. I think a lot of times we use very negative words where we think, oh, but I don't mean it that way. Oh, it doesn't matter. No. Words carry energy. We know that. It's those experiments have been replicated over and over again. So it's a lot of different things to look out for, but it might be different for each and every single person, depending on how busy they are at work, how public facing they are, how much time they have as a private person. Do they have a family? Do they live alone? And then we look at that and then just completely adjust whatever they need. And then the result oftentimes is that like pain that they've had for years just goes away without changing anything externally.
Yeah, usually it is. My sister calls that your body is talking. So your body is trying to give you a message, basically. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Pamela. I love that. And for the listeners that are interested in this, Pamela also has made a guide from over 20 spiritual, but not only spiritual tools and resources, I think that you've tried and healing sessions, Pamela, that you made and that people can download on your website. So if you're interested in more of the breathwork sessions and other things and how that can help, you can download the link on the website. We will add it at the website, of course, of Pamela under the podcast. And then back to your own journey, Pamela, because now you are living and building an aligned and ambitious life. So I always find it fascinating to hear how a week or a day of a person actually looks like, because it's always a bit hidden or a taboo, even in today's society. So can you talk us a bit through like how does a random day or a week even look like for you? Because you said like you don't overwork, you rather want to work roughly around 30 hours a week. So you have to be very focused, I think, on what you do and intentional. Practically, how does it look like?
I love having a morning just to myself. So control over my morning already makes a big difference. And I've noticed that varies depending on the country or time zone I'm in. So when I'm in a European time zone, it typically is easier because when we work a lot with like American clients, most of the meetings would be rather in the afternoon. So I'd get up, I'd make some tea, I'd meditate for about, depending on the kind of meditation I want to feel like the day I have ahead, between 30 minutes to an hour 15. Then I do some sort of a workout. Could be running, could be inline skating, could be strength-based training. Sometimes I would also just grab my bicycle, ride like 45 minutes to a coffee shop, and then start work from there. Or then get home, finish up morning coffee, and then start work. But typically my morning is somewhat 2 to 3 hours before I actually start work.
And is that also because you work up early, or you just prioritize that and that's why? Because people might now listen to it and feel like, yeah, that sounds nice, but I have kids to bring to work or kids to bring to school. I have to go to work. How do you make that happen?
Yeah. So I don't have kids. However, I do get up early. I love getting up early, typically between 5 to 6 a.m. or when the sun is up. But I've also noticed, and I've gotten that feedback from so many people over the years, is that I am really disciplined with those things. So I know a lot of people, and even those that I work with as clients that have kids, tend to make excuses and put themselves last all the time. And I'm not saying ignore you kids, ignore your family or whatever. But if you are not happy, if you're not aligned yourself, you cannot be the best parent you want to be. You cannot be the best spouse you want to be. So you do have to put yourself first at certain times. And interestingly enough, every single time someone does that, you also become a more attractive partner and person overall. So yeah, putting yourself first. So that's my morning. I start work. Then sometimes I have lunch meetings. I meet up with friends. Or I might drive right home on my bicycle again. I might cook something depending on where I'm at, and then do like another 3 hour work session in the evening. So roughly it's like 2, 3 hours in the morning, 2, 3 hours in the afternoon, evening, and then in the evening, read a book, go somewhere, do an activity. I love baking, meeting up with friends, experiencing something new. Currently, I'm also doing I'm taking a TMJ massage course, so that's taking
Oh,
a bit of my
nice.
time. And I'm usually in bed by 9, latest 10. So I'm an earlier sleeper.
Yeah, but also because you wake up early and then you have the morning to yourself again, which you find important
Yeah.
before you start work. I love that. Thanks for sharing, Pamela.
Yeah.
What's currently still work in progress for you? You said, like, yes, I'm aligned ambitious, but I'm also not on all elements there yet. What is still in the making?
Setting boundaries, definitely, and voicing my needs. So I grew up in a way where when I voiced my needs, it meant punishment. So I said I wanted something and I was met with criticism or other things. And that's, I would say I've done about 80% of the work, but practicing that on a daily basis or weekly basis um, with different working, private relationships, and so on, that's something I'm currently observing and trying to do my 1% every day.
And especially also when you work with a team at Ajala Digital, of course, that can be very useful as a leader to voice that as well, and but also with clients and so on. So an important tool for the rest of your life.
Absolutely, absolutely, and making sure that you agreed on something on a specific scope of work, and that doesn't get overstepped. Yeah, I
Especially
don't
as a
have that
business
problem
owner.
often,
Yeah.
thankfully, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I can relate to that. And what are you dreaming of today? Well, like both on the alignment and on the ambitious side for you personally in your business. What's on your wish list, dream board? What are you manifesting at the moment?
Oh, currently it's very simple things for the ad company. It's a webinar I I have to redo or update. Um, for Hustle Less and Live More, I would really like to help more corporate clients release stress and trauma. So I would love to manifest that, if we want to phrase it that way.
Well, let's hope with this
Um,
podcast
yeah.
from the corporate audience that some will come your way.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. And that this is a small reminder for people too that really the power rests in your calmness. You might think you're powerful when you're stressed and there's a lot of energy, but the true power, the life and the creation power is from when we're in a state of calmness.
So you're nurturing that constantly, right?
Yes, yes, because my nervous system also is like has been trained to always be like this is like all over, and so I have to make a conscious effort to like pull it back down and be grounded and be like, no, whenever I'm calm, that's when the good things happen.
And is it the case, Pamela, that on your like dream or wish list, there are not
Yeah.
that many big bold things? Because if we go back to what you said earlier, you do things intentionally, you get the desire when the timing is right. And that's why you don't like have this, oh, big dream in 5 years, I want to have this. Is that why you didn't mention these
Um. Well,
parts?
I just talked about that with one friend today. There's this chocolate guy, Amaury Guichon, and he has this chocolate patisserie in school in Las Vegas. And so I want to do that one day in the next couple of years. That's on my wish list.
Nice.
Um, so I do have some of that, but overall, this is probably going to be the definition of a humble brag. But I have climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. I've done the world trip. Um, I've been to so many places and I've had so many experiences, which I'm immensely grateful for. But that also makes me be very conscious about what else I want, because I've already achieved a lot of what I want or what I wanted. So I'm very happy about that. So I really care more about carefully curated experiences and being in the moment of those, instead of just saying, you know what, I'm just going to tick off another box.
Yeah, and I assume that also because you're calm, Pamela, you're very aligned to what you're doing. You're already naturally in a happiness state, so that you don't need a lot of other points and things to add on top to make you much more fulfilled or happy, that you're quite aligned with where you are right now in life.
Correct. Yeah, I materialistic things mean very little to me. I love it. I love enjoyment. So, for example, if it's a really good dinner of food experiences, sure, I'll spend my money on that. If it's something for my family, yes, I'll spend my money on it. But getting any of those typical status symbols or generic status symbols doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah, well, that's great, right? That you know what makes you happy and what not. With that knowledge of today, what would you tell your younger self that might also be inspiring for the listeners who are maybe in a bit of an earlier stage of their aligned, ambitious journey?
Keep going, keep listening to your body, keep practicing that skill. It's not something that comes instantly. It's something you practice over time, but it's something that will pay off in your life more than you can ever imagine it.
And closing off then, what's a final prompt or reflection question that you want to give back to the listeners?
Since we're recording this around summer solstice,
Mm-hmm.
what are 5 things that I have grown in, or that have grown in my life this year? And then maybe also on the other hand, what are 5 things that I want to let go of and that I don't want to bring into the remainder of the year? And if you want to create that into a little ritual, you can write it. You can write the 5 things that have grown this year on the front of the paper, the other 5 things you want to let go of on the back of the paper. And when you're done, give it some thanks, some gratitude, and then you can tear it apart and let it go.
And then hopefully in 6 months from now, we hear positive stories, Pamela, from people who've done that and who have achieved the good things and let go of their things they want to let go of.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be really beautiful.
But it's more about being in the moment and doing that than really saying, you know what? Oh, I achieved that and that. Like really focus on just in the moment and having that moment of reflection for yourself.
Thanks for sharing that. And for the listeners, we would love to hear any feedback from your prompt reflection question, but also today and in the future, if any of that did come true, then do let me or Pamela know. If I hear it, and I will share it with Pamela too, because we love hearing those results. Pamela, thanks so much for being here today and for sharing your wisdom. I feel like we could go on for a few hours, but I want to be mindful of your time and also of the listeners' time. If any of the listeners would like to connect with Pamela, you can follow her on LinkedIn, on her Hustle Less, Live More LinkedIn as well, where she's sharing a lot of inspirational content, tools, resources, and much more. Or, of course, work with Pamela if you feel like you're at a point where you realize there's work to be done and you do want to continue your own aligned, ambitious journey in a much deeper acceleration, then Pamela is there for you. And Pamela, with that, I would like to thank you so much again for being here and for sharing all your wisdom today.
Thank you so much, Flo. It was a pleasure. It was a lot of fun. And I look forward to hearing the comments and what people have to say.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pamela.